Right now, we are walking along what is probably one of my favorite historic sites on Earth. This is Omaha Beach. Specifically, we are standing on the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach. This is the place where on June 6, 1944, the 16th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red 1, came in off of their landing craft and made their way across this beach to storm the heights above. And we focus a lot on the stories of the men who landed on this beach. Men like Joe Dawson and John Spaulding and Philip Strazak, and that's a good thing. But how did the American people back home learn of what these men did? Who was here to tell their story? Well, that's a little bit of what we are going to be focusing on today. There were a few different ways that people back home learned about what happened here on June 6th. One was through the written word, reporters coming along, journalists who were making observations and then taking those observations and then putting them to paper. And another way that people learned about what happened here was through a visual medium, through photography. So we're going to take a look at a couple of individuals who helped us to understand what happened here on D-Day and in the days after. And along with me today, I have a few friends. I've got Leif Babin, who is with Echelon Front. He's a retired Navy SEAL, served in Task Unit Bruiser, SEAL Team 3 in the Battle of Normandy. So he I'm sure has some perspectives on this that'll be interesting. And we also have his wife, Jenna Babin, who is a journalist with the YouTube channel Smart Her News. So anyway, first, I want to take a look at some of the most famous photos that were taken right here. I want us to pause for just a moment and think about what it must have been like for the men who stepped off of their landing craft right here in the early morning hours of June 6th, 1944. Men, again, like Joe Dawson and John Spaulding and Philip Strazak. This would have been just absolute horror. So, as we are approaching the bluffs here, we're kind of at low tide. So this is close to the expanse of beach that the men from the Big Red 1 would have seen when they came ashore. And off to our left, well, you can see the bunkers of Widerstand Nest 62, just providing flanking fire on this section of the beach. So this would have just been absolute horror. Of course, the beaches are clear today. On D-Day, we would have had these log ramps, and there would have been hedgehogs and Belgian gates and posts stuck in the ground with teller mines on them. All kinds of obstacles that these guys were making their way through to get up to the safety of or relative safety, I should say, of the bluffs. And coming along with them, either in the first wave or the second wave, it's debatable which, was a photographer by the name of Robert Capa. So Robert Capa was a Hungarian American, and this guy was something else. He's kind of known now for being a pretty adventurous spirit. World War II was not the only war that he covered. He also covered the Spanish Civil War, had a very famous photo that he took called The Falling Soldier. He was in China when the Japanese invaded, and he was working for Collier's magazine and had been fired by them, and was picked up by Leif magazine and was put on assignment to cover the D-Day landings. So when he came ashore, whether it was first wave or second wave, that's debatable. He said first wave, but we don't know for sure. But regardless, there would have been bullets flying everywhere, there would have been mortars going off, there would have been artillery. This would have been a very, very dangerous spot when he was snapping his photos. Now, I personally don't have any experience being downrange of people firing at me, but I'm with someone who does have a little bit of experience in that area, Leif Babin.
I'll never forget the first time I was shot at, certainly, and I don't think anyone will, when you realize that, hey, there's people there that are trying to kill me, and some of them are very good at what they do, and so I can only imagine what it was like for so many of these young men in the beaches, most of which had never seen combat before, and we're experiencing that for the first time. When you've got German gunners that have the coordinates dialed in, that are sending artillery and mortars and machine guns down into their position, that must have been absolutely terrifying. And particularly when you see people that you love and care about next to you that are seriously wounded or killed, that's something that's absolutely horrifying. And so I think it's also a time where leaders step up, and actually it takes one person just to get people moving in the right direction, get people actually to start moving forward. And there were so many leaders at every level here on these beaches that did exactly that. And I think I'm just in awe. I mean, even what tiny amount of combat that I've seen pales in comparison to what these men went through on just this single day of action here on June 6, 1944, and of course in the months and months that followed of fighting across Europe for those that survived this day. I can only imagine what they went through, and I can just tell you it's awe-inspiring to think of their heroism, their courage, and the leadership that it required for them to be successful.
So amid all of the shell fire and chaos that was happening here on the beach, Robert Capa comes ashore, and he's got his camera, and all of these things are going on around him, and he's snapping these photos. Now, there's a story that he had taken a lot of photos and they got ruined by some young lab technician in the darkroom. Again, that might be kind of a post-war cover for the fact that he didn't get a whole lot of pictures here, but the photos that he did get are absolutely stunning. So the work of Robert Capa helps us to see what it looked like here on D-Day. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words. But you still need the words. We still need people who are on the ground, who can take the things that they see and and convert it into the written word to help us understand what we can't see ourselves. And that's where journalists come in. Journalists like Ernie Pyle, who was here on Omaha Beach. And here with us today to kind of help understand the role of journalism in its purest form is Jenna Babin from the channel Smart Her News.
I like to think that journalism is in my blood because my grandfather was an Associated Press war correspondent during World War II, and he remains a little bit of a mystery to me. I remember going over his house as a little girl, and he used to have all these National Geographic magazines piled around him, and he always wore suit pants and suspenders and a button-down shirt and a fedora, and he had a really scary, at the time for me, eye patch on his glasses because he lost his sight, and that's how he stopped being a practicing journalist. He had deployed, my understanding, and I still am learning about it, is that he had gone to Europe, gone to around the area of Italy during World War II, and got the nickname Lucky Lee because apparently the ship that he was on was bombed, but he was able to keep his typewriter or keep writing, and so that's a little bit of the lore that I've read about him. But he went many places as part of his career, and I never really got to hear about it from him because he passed away when I was in my early teenage years, and just kind of getting an understanding of what he did. So he was a practicing journalist with the Associated Press for his entire career until he retired because of his eyesight. And I always loved journalism. I loved writing in particular. And I sort of fell into broadcast journalism because when I eventually went to Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism, I could check a box for print or digital or broadcast, which sounds prehistoric right now, even saying that. But that was in 2004, and so I checked broadcast because it would do everything the print program would do, plus the broadcast, so I thought it was 2 for the price of 1, and I thought that was a better deal because I was taking out so many loans to go to school. But I was sort of in denial that journalism could be a career for me, and it was several twists of fate that enabled me to get the clips that I needed, to get the experience that I needed to eventually become a working journalist. So, I believe journalism in its purest form is the facts. It sounds really boring and very elementary, but the who, what, where, when, how, and why that we learned about in elementary school remains as important to me as a journalist now as it ever was in my early career, because those are the basic things that we need to cover that we often ignore. And especially in this particular stage of journalism where there is an understandable frustration from the public with the press, it's the part that we miss the most, is just what's going on and why it matters, which is all that is the foundation for Smarter News, which is the platform that I built after leaving quote-unquote traditional media.
When you think of famous journalists from the Second World War, the name that probably first comes to mind is Ernie Pyle. There was another journalist who was here on Omaha Beach by the name of Martha Gellhorn. And this woman was really something else. She was married to Ernest Hemingway for a while. They had kind of a tumultuous relationship, which, if you're going to be married to Ernest Hemingway, I think is part of the package. And she was working for Collier's magazine and made her way over to England, wanted to come to Normandy and report on what was happening here. So she basically lied to the MPs, said that she was doing a story on nurses, got on a hospital ship, hid in the bathroom, and came here to the beaches of Normandy, came in on a landing craft, and started reporting on what she saw. Now, there are a lot of reputable sites online who say that Martha Gellhorn was the only woman to land on D-Day, and that may or may not be true. All right, so I brought a few things with me today. These are 2 issues of Collier's magazine that both have articles from Martha Gellhorn. Now, I mentioned how there are some websites online that say that Martha Gellhorn was the only woman who landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day or came ashore on D-Day. And the reputable sites and people make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I've said things that ended up to, not being quite accurate. So I'm not being critical. I'm just saying that I don't think that she came ashore on D-Day. And here's why I say that. So if you look at this issue of Collier's magazine, this is from July 29th, 1944. And this one is from August 5th of 1944. And in this issue right here, well, she has an article called Hangdog Herrenvolk. You can see there, it says it's by Martha Gellhorn. And it's talking about the German prisoners who were coming in to Britain. So she's giving an account of what she's seeing. So this obviously has to be after D-Day. And then if we go over to this one here, well, this is one on the wounded coming home. Now this is her reporting from Normandy and talking about the wounded that she's seeing, and she describes what she's seeing on the beach and in the towns, and what she's seeing with the different soldiers. So was she there on D-Day? I would rather doubt it, unless these articles were not printed in chronological order. But that doesn't lessen any of what she did or her contribution. And I think we kind of need to get away from this idea that if somebody didn't land on D-Day, that somehow what they did was less. Because I've seen this with people find out that their great-grandfather or their grandfather landed on D+1 or D+2, and then they're kind of disappointed. And I think that is that is just that's disappointing to me. So anyway, Martha Gellhorn really did some incredible work, and her words just paint such an amazing picture of what she saw on Omaha Beach.
This is a section called No Time for Interviews. It's by Martha Gellhorn from Santa. Okay, in this section, No Time for Interviews. It would be hard to tell you of the wounded. There were so many of them. There was no time to talk. There was too much else to do. They had to be fed, as most of them had not eaten for 2 days. Their shoes had to be cut off. They needed help to get out of their jackets. They wanted water. The nurses and orderlies, working like demons, had to be found and called quickly to a bunk where a man suddenly and desperately needed attention. Plasma bottles must be watched. Cigarettes had to be lighted and held for those who could not use their hands. It seemed to take hours to pour hot coffee from the spout of a teapot into a mouth that just showed through bandages. I mean, that's the sort of description that's missing often from the press right now, because it's so full of commentary. She has a certain picture that she saw, and she's relaying it in short sentences that are describing a scene for her audience. And that's what, when a journalist is successful, that's what we can do, which is bring you to the place that you weren't able to go, because you have your own life, and a journalist is supposed to be able to be of service to you and bring you to these places that you don't get a chance to see or feel. And so, I mean, just think of this gives you such a vivid picture of the chaos in this time period. I mean, even that first line, it would be hard to tell you of the wounded. There were so many of them. I love that disclaimer because she put it in there on purpose. I mean, I'm just reading this for the first time, but she's admitting that she can't tell you the full picture, but she's going to give you some of it. And I think that authenticity, that disclaimer of saying, I can't tell you all of it, it's so overwhelming, gives the audience an instant window into what this was like. With the short sentences, the very quick description, this last part about pouring hot coffee from the spout of a teapot into a mouth that just showed through bandages. I mean, that's real journalism, and that's what you get when you actually are walking a site and seeing something for real with their own eyes. There's nothing that one can do like this if you're just viewing it from social media. You know, think about some of the war and conflict scenes that we're all seeing. And it's very clear to have a picture in your mind and have emotion associated with it. But to be there and see it, to have the smells and the sights and the sounds, it just gives you a completely different vantage point that's so incredibly important. And this is why, you know, war correspondents matter, because they're going into these very dangerous areas and they're bringing something like this to us that we wouldn't otherwise see, and we will not see simply through a camera on our phone. So it's a little bit of a tough time in journalism because, you know, I'm sure that Martha Gellhorn would have loved some of the technology of bringing a phone around and making sure she kind of captured everything, but she didn't have it, so she had to rely on herself. And what I can tell you as a journalist is that often going into scenes, I haven't been in a scene like this and I haven't been in a war zone, but as a practicing journalist, there are times that in your reporting it becomes a physical experience where you actually feel something in your body and you're able to translate that into words and take someone along. And I can feel that she had that experience, and that comes from 2 feet on the ground, seeing it for yourself, not seeing it through a lens, and relaying it for your audience. And one last thought, this is someone that's prioritizing her audience, because it's not about what she saw and how she felt. She's trying to make you see something and feel something, and that's very clear in her writing.
All right, well, there you go. That was a little bit on how D-Day and the days after were reported to the American people in June of 1944. Kind of a different way to look at what happened here along these beaches. So anyway, we've got a lot that we are going to be doing here in Normandy over the next week or so, so be watching out for that. Also, be sure to check out the work that Leif and Jenna Babin are doing online with Echelon Front and with Smart Herd News. Both have great channels that would be worth your time to check out. But anyway, for now, we're going to head on to the next place.